All right, let me start these. Yep, it's telling me I'm sharing. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But let's get started. This is a party for parties, an electoral solution to the two-party system. And what we have in the United States right now is what's called a first past the post system. You have, this is noted by having single seat districts. So for every geographic area that gets to vote, they only vote on one seat. It is winner take all. Whomever gets the most votes wins. It doesn't need a majority. A plurality doesn't. And as a result of this, we have the wisdom of Duverger, who gave us Duverger's law, that first past the post systems tend to two parties on the local level. In the United States, we see it's always the Democrats and Republicans. But for example, Canada has it, and we'll have some places where you have the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. Other places, it's the Liberal Party and the Québécois Party, but that's Quebec specifically. But they have like 4 or 5 parties in circulation. But locally, it gets limited to where pretty much everyone's voting for one of two choices. Whoever one of the two are the biggest there. And that leads us to the lesser of two evils. Something that we constantly deal with here and in third parties. I'm sure we all know how that goes. I think I have a thing about lesser of two evils for on actually, so I'm not gonna go now. But note the landmark study of Gillens and Page, testing theories of American politics, elites, interest groups, and average citizens from 2014. Here they looked at various policy decisions made by the U.S. government between, I think it was 1983 to 2003, maybe it was a little bit later than that, but not a whole lot later. This is all before Citizens United in that. And they had 4 different models that they were looking for. And I think you guys can see my mouse on here. And this is their table from there. Majoritarian electoral democracy is one. That's where the average citizens have all the power. That's what we like to think that we are. Then you have dominance by economic elites, where you have some or little influence by, or you have some influence by citizens and all interest groups, and business interest groups, of course, but majority of it by economic elites. You have majoritarian pluralism, where the average citizen has that little bit of influence, but all interest groups have major influence, not none or little by economic elites. And last is biased pluralism, where all the interest groups are all interest groups, and specifically the mass interest groups, have little influence, but you have a whole lot by business groups. And they looked at the policies, decide who wanted what to figure out what went where. What is the United States? And so I want to give a few of the quotes from their conclusion. When the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are controlled for, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Overall, net interest group alignments are not significantly related to preferences of average citizens. The net alignments of the most influential business-oriented groups are negatively related to the average citizens. Existing interest groups do not serve effectively as a transmission belt for the wishes of the population as a whole. To be sure, this does not mean that ordinary citizens always lose out. They fairly often get the policies they favor. but only because those policies happen to also be preferred by the economically elite citizens who wield the actual influence. And finally, what do our findings say about democracy in America? They certainly constitute troubling news for advocates of populistic democracy who want governments to respond primarily or exclusively to the public policy preferences of their citizens. In the United States, our findings indicate the majority does not rule, at least not in the causal sense of actually determining policy outcomes. When majority of citizens disagrees with economic elites or with organized interests, they generally lose. Moreover, because of the strong status quo bias built into the US political system, even when fairly large majorities of Americans favor policy change, they generally do not get it. And so this comes from the fact that if you look just at what the average citizen gets, majority of the time they do get what they want. But they also agree with the economic elites in those circumstances. Whenever they're disagreeing with it, they don't get their way, which shows that they're not the ones who are actually influencing government. And this is what we're looking at that actually came from the system here that we have, the first past the post system, our two-party system. When we vote the lesser of two evils, they are not doing what Americans want generally. They're not listening to us. They're listening to those big donors that are keeping them afloat, who are paying them bribes through essentially inflated speaking fees, lobbyist posts, all that later on. So let's look at some of these alternatives here. You can have a single district proportional representation. This is where proportional representation can be done in several ways. You have multiple seats per legislative district, and you separate it based on how many votes people get. A lot of places, like in Britain, they'll have 3 or 4 seats per district, but you can put it where the entire nation is under a single district. So they're not representing a geographic area other than the United States as a whole, and you're just getting this ideological representation. That's something that we can have. You can have instant runoff voting for executive positions, because executive positions are going to be a single seat issue. You can only have one president, one mayor, one governor. So instant runoff voting works great for that. It allows people to not worry about throwing away their vote. They're voting for who they want the most. And then we narrow it down to who are the 2 most popular, and people are choosing between those all at once. We can have easier ballot access, because one of the strongest issues we have is a lack of ballot access. It used to be that you didn't have any ballot access laws, your party could get on, no problem. There was never any problems. But then the 2 major parties started making it so that you had to pass all these requirements to get on the ballot so they could get those voters. And of course, guaranteed media access, because we struggle from not having the media access. And I'm thinking now I may not have put in the lesser of 2 evils, but we'll go into that further if we need to. Our big barriers to getting in here, we have the lack of ballot access. It's a huge struggle to get on there. I know in Michigan, it was estimated 15 years ago that would cost about $50,000 in paid petitioners to get on the ballot. You look at California, that was $1 million to get in there. It is insanely expensive, and you cannot get this based just on volunteers, at least the conventional wisdom right now. It's not possible. That keeps third parties from getting attention and getting their messages across. You have media access issues. Media doesn't talk about us. They decide the whole discussion is between the Democrats and Republicans. And how we look at 2016, You had Bernie with a sellout crowd, and they were instead showing an empty podium for Donald Trump. That is the media bias in action, and that makes it so it's very hard for us um, to actually compete on an equal level. You have the political gamesmanship of the lesser of two evil voting. When you're looking at it, doesn't look like it's possible for your average, for a third party to win. People don't pay attention to it. They don't want to hear about it. They just decide they, logically, any third party can win. Just you have to get over psychological barriers in addition to the legislative barriers. And of course, you have electoral sabotage that comes up. And this is in fighting between third parties. For example, I remember in our 2012 presidential campaign, we had submitted the documents to get on the ballot in Illinois. It wasn't all the everything that we needed to legally get on, but it would have to be challenged by somebody. Democrats and Republicans didn't challenge it. A member of the Green Party challenged it and got us kicked off. 4 years later, he did it again. Then he died before the next election. But we have issues like that where we have a lot of infighting amongst various third parties when people don't understand that you're not helping your party by shutting out other voices. Actually tends to work the opposite way, where you get fewer votes when there's fewer choices. People are paying less attention. So this brings us to our third party, and I'm just going with some imagery. I suggest we call it the Yellow Turban Party. It doesn't have to be called that by any means, but I just like it. A little bit of the Yellow Turbans imagery. Their big saying, the blue sky is dead, the yellow sky is established. Where the blue, in their case, was the Han Dynasty, which went by, they use blue as their color. For us, it's the Democratic Party. We're declaring the Democratic Party dead. And we have to make clear when we're doing whatever we're doing that the Democratic Party is dead. There's no way we're going back. They could run Bernie, they can run AOC, they can run an actual socialist. The party has ruined itself. It is dead in the water. And this is key for making it where the lesser of two evils works in our favor. They can't win. They have to join us in trying to do this, or they're throwing away their vote. And this is really has to be a big movement, and we need some runway here. This is not something that you start right before the election. We can't do this for 2024, but we can start doing this for 2026 if we can organize in time and get that message out, get the momentum. But this was a peasant revolt in Han, China, as the result of a famine from 184 CE. And so that's personally what I'd like to call it. Doesn't have to be called that. But when we're looking at how we want to structure this, because we've had a lot of problems in the past when we try to do unity things. For example, you have the Progressive Party in 1920s or 30s, where you have La Follette, got a whole bunch of people behind him. He drained membership from all these different third parties, and they ran one or two elections, failed, and then everyone folded into the Democratic Party. It did not go into continued presence there. So how do we get around that? Well, no individuals join the party. Instead, rather, parties join the party. That way, parties are keeping their memberships. They're keeping their activities. But electorally, we focus on this joint vessel to get elected. We have a shared ballot line with candidacies allotted by member parties' membership. So, for example, we get the Greens in there, they're probably going to be the biggest party. They're going to get the majority of candidates. They'll probably get the presidential candidate they get to pick, as well as, lots of the Senate and House seats, but we're trying to fill up as much as we can with members from all over, and we try to portion it based on these individual party memberships. That does keep the focus on individual parties getting the actual people to join the party. And when people want to participate in this, they have to pick one of those member parties to join. And it would probably be a good idea to get try to convince people like the DSA, break off the Democratic Party, run as one of these member parties, get them involved. And another big thing is when we're trying to do this as a joint effort, we probably want a minimalist platform. We don't want the joint platform, or we don't want to have a platform like the platform we have now. We want something that is minimally left. And going a little bit more into that, we're not establishing socialism with the platform that this party would have. As it's as far right as the progressive Democrats to encompass more people, because we need that mass takeover. And it's going to work out in the end because it's going to make it so that we can have a better chance of having socialism in the next 10, 20, 30 years than we would have otherwise. It's a short-term stopping point. Doesn't mean we stop advocating for socialism. Doesn't mean the candidates can't talk about socialism, but what we're running on and what we're enacting when we get elected is going to be that minimalist platform while we're doing this. And for that, we have to remind ourselves that socialism is not right around the corner. Bernie stole that moment from us. We had a chance of building a real socialist movement in 2012 and 2016. Really in 2012. And Bernie just sucked them all up, sent them towards the Democratic Party when we had Occupy, despite the fact that Occupy was opposing Democratic Party policy, and the Democratic Party is who shut it down. Most likely Joe Biden working from the White House, but there was talk from liberal outlets that the Democratic Party, or that there was coordination from within the White House for that. The prime goal is to establish a constitutional convention, passing a new constitution, and then we dissolve the party. This party exists for this constitutional convention to get a new constitution where third parties are playing on an equal level, where we're having a democratic system, that majoritarian democratic or majoritarian democracy, as opposed to having something run by the economic elites and business interests. In order to do this, we must win the House, which those are 2-year elections. Every 2 years, the entire House faces election. We have to win the presidency. That's a seat that comes up every 4 years. We must win the Senate, and those seats come up every 6 years. Every 2 years, some states are voting for it, but we need 2/3 of the Senate to do this. We need to, we need to be winning at least 2 elections in a row. Most likely you're looking at 3, because chance of us sweeping the senatorial elections is unlikely. The chance of the Republicans and Democrats getting behind the constitutional change is also unlikely. Unless it's really limiting their ability to govern totally, which is possible, but I wouldn't rely upon it. And we also may be able to convince right-leaning parties, such as the Libertarians, to form a similar party with the same goals. They would have that minimalist right-wing agenda that is like the moderate Republicans or something like that. Not and they would be our counter position, but we'd all be working for that same constitutional convention. Now, the potential drawbacks I see with my plan, there's only one that I've come up with, is that the parties who join and then leave may lose their ballot access. And if this fails, we all lose our ballot access. We're starting from scratch, starting over again, trying to create a, we're back at square one. Now we're already not winning many elections. I don't think this is a huge drawback. It's something that's going to keep people in. And I think that this is a strategy that can work. We have to have the momentum and energy behind it to get it rolling. But once it starts rolling, Americans are ready for this. They've been wanting a third party for what, 20, 30 years now. Majority of Americans want a third party option. This is something that they can get behind, and majority of Americans are to the left of the Democrats. They support the those Bernie Sanders type reforms. That is what's in the minimalist that can get people really behind the party, overtake and replace the Democratic Party. This has happened before. The Republican Party did replace the Whig Party over 2 elections. Finally, all glory to the Hypnotoad. But seriously, let's get to discussion. I'll read those chat comments and see how long I actually took. I may have rushed through that. 23 minutes, not horrible.